everyone, welcome. I'm Izzy at Minerva. Today we are looking at how to create a zip fly construction just on the front of our trousers. We're only looking at this one particular opening method for the trousers because this is very bespoke to a pair of trousers, and it's a really lovely detail to learn how to draft to quite simply put in a nice little zip at the front of your trousers. So to follow along today, you're going to need your standard pattern drafting tools, which are listed here. I'll be using my own personal trouser block, but obviously you could use your own block, or you could use a pattern that you're adapting to recreate the fly zip. Don't forget, if you're using a pattern at home, remove the seam allowances from the pattern piece before you follow along with the instructions today. We're assuming that our block has no seam allowances on it, and we'll be adding those when we create our pattern pieces in this video today. As we run through this tutorial, I will not be adding a waistband to the top of the trousers, simply because I've already shown you how to create a whole range of different types of waistbands. If you refer back to the pattern drafting series, videos 14 to 20, we talk you through a whole range of different types of waistbands. So you can use those tutorials on videos 14 to 20, the pattern drafting series, to then add into this technique that I'm showing you today on your block. Okay, so we're going to start off just with our front trouser pattern piece. We're not going to look at the back today, we're just focusing on how to create this zip and how to draft your zip pattern pieces. So you are going to need a zip, and the zip length should be at least as long as the hip line. That's obviously the widest part. You need to pull your trousers up and over your body. We've got two extra pieces that we need to draft today, and the first one is going to be our fly, and then also the fly extension. So let's do the fly first of all. So we've got our centre front line here, and we've got our hip line running across our block at this point. Very simply, the very first thing we're going to do is just run a line parallel to the centre front and 4 centimetres offset from it. Then draw a line that's 2 centimetres offset from the hip line and below the hip line. We then just want to just curve off that corner. So just find a curve that you're happy with. You might find it easy just to sketch it in rather than use your pattern drafting ruler. Next, I want to measure that distance from the waist all the way down to the bottom of the fly. So this is going to be the fly piece. Everyone's measurement is going to be different at this point. For me, it's 23 centimetres. Draw a line that is 23 centimetres on a new sheet of paper, just straight down. At the top, square across by 4.5 centimetres and then square down. I've extended this line just a little bit longer than my line over here, and I'm just going to draw a nice sort of soft curve up to that point. The next thing that I want to do is measure the length from the waist to the hip. So grab your pattern drafting ruler, and for everyone that'll be different. So you take your measurement, for me it's 21. And on this outside line here, just mark a point that is that distance, waist to hip, on this line here. That will become our notch in the future. This becomes our fly extension pattern piece, effectively. At this point now, we've done all the drafting we need to do. They are quite simple to sort of construct those two pieces. Let's go grab some tracing paper and then create our pattern pieces out of these block pieces that we've just done. Okay, we're not attaching the waist to anything at this stage, so I'm just going to draw a nice neat line straight across there. I'm drawing my front trouser block to start off with. We will, of course, add our seam allowance to the centre front at 1.5 centimetres. Let's draw around that inner seam. And for the sake of this video, I'm just going to ignore the darts because that's irrelevant to how we're constructing the fly. Obviously, any type of details that you're doing at the top of the trousers, whether you're gathering or doing darts or pleats, you need to add those into your pattern piece too. For this piece, I'm literally just going to be doing the centre front adaptation, so I'm just going to cut around the outside of the trouser leg here without adding a seam allowance. Let's add our hip notch. That's going to be a really helpful reference for us as we develop our pattern, and of course the grain line. So this is the zip fly front trouser cut 2. With our fly piece, we're only going to cut one, so just follow, we're not attaching this side to anything else. So just draw straight along there and straight along the bottom like that. However, the centre front is going to be attached to the trousers, so add in a 1.5cm seam allowance along that centre front. And we'll just draw in the top of the waist as we're not adding that to anything else. At this point, I want to add a notch where the centre front line is, and I also want to add a notch where the hip line is. Grain line obviously follows the centre front. This is the fly, and we're going to cut one right side up. Okay, with our fly extension, we are going to cut this on the fold. I'm literally just tracing all the way around it. It's an independent piece, so all we need to know is that we're going to cut this side here on the fold. We want to draw in that notch, which matches up with the hip notches, so all those pieces are nicely aligned, and then just label it. Fly extension, cut one on fold, right side up. And our grain line runs parallel with the place on fold line. Great, let's cut out our pattern pieces now, tracing paper, and then I'm going to give you a quick demo on how to actually use those pieces to add the zip into the trousers. So let's give that a go together next. Okay, so we've got our 3 pattern pieces here and also our zip. You could use any type of zip for this. Obviously you could use a jean zip or anything you want. We've just got a nice standard zip here. So to start off with, we are just going to work with our fly extension, which is this one here. So the wrong side of the fabric has got a big X on it. So what we want to do to start off with is just fold it in half, right sides together down the length of it, just so 6mm along the curve of the bottom down here. And then just turn it right side facing out. Press that in place. And then if you want to, in terms of finishing, you can now just finish that side using whatever method you want to. Lovely. Don't forget, if you've overlocked it, that you need to just annotate where that notch is again. With the folded edge of the zipper extension on the right and the finished edge on the left, and your zip right side facing up so you can see the pull nice and clearly here, we're going to pop the zip on top of the fly extension, lining up the very top of the zip with the top of the fly extension. Don't forget, we've not added a seam allowance there. If you've got a seam allowance, you want to make sure the top of your zip aligns with the seam allowance. Just pin that in place now. And we're just lining up the edge of the zipper tape with the finished edge of the fly extension. We're just going to sew that in place now using our zipper foot if you've got one. Now I'm using contrasting thread and contrasting zip, so you can just clearly see what I'm doing here. Okay, next we're going to get the right side of our trouser, which is the right side as we wear it. So this is the right side facing up, and it's the right trouser leg. So next we're just going to flip that over so the zip is now in between the leg and the fly extension, and we're just going to pin that in place, lining up the notch of the hip notch and lining up the raw edge nicely. Sew that in place, again just 6mm offset from the raw edge there. Okay, so that's nice and attached there now, 6mm offset from the raw edge. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn it all so it looks like it's right side facing out, just like that. And we're literally just going to top stitch all the way down here, just a couple of millimeters away from the folded edge. And we're only doing it down to the notch point, which is down here, which is where our stitch line finished previously. Just like that. Okay, this is now our left leg, and the right side of the leg is facing up on the screen. We're going to grab our fly that we cut before, and we've only got one of these pattern pieces. We're just going to pop it right sides together, and it should just line up absolutely beautifully with that centre front line. Just so from the top all the way down to the notch. At this point, if you've not done it already, just snip in to the notch so that it meets the stitch line. Then flip the whole of that fly piece out so its right sides are facing up, And then tuck it under so the wrong sides are together at that point. We're going to go and press that next so that the fly is hidden and tucked under the front of the trousers just by a couple of millimetres. Next, we're just going to sew a line of stitches along that folded edge to hold the fly together. This is a top stitch, so just a few millimetres away from the folded edge again. Next, we're going to put both trouser legs together, right sides together, and pin in place along that bottom curve of the crotch only from the notch to the inner side seam, just like that. Baste the crotch seam curve in place at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance up to the notch. Once you've sewn that, open it out so the right side is facing up. Now at this point, the folded edge of the fly at this point should go over and match up with the centre front notch, which is on the opposite side there. Pin the fly to the centre front and then flip everything over so that you're looking at the wrong side of the garment facing up. Okay, now let's just flip the fly guard to one side, and we're just going to temporarily just pin it in place so that it doesn't get in the way as we sew our main zipper. And now what we want to do is we just want to pin the tape of the zip to the fly. So pop your hand in between the trouser front and the fly and just pin that zip in place along there, being very careful not to make sure that it's still sitting flat at the front when you do that. Check it on the front to make sure it's still sitting nice and flat. Great, that looks fine. At this point, I'm just going to sew a row of basting stitches just to keep that zip in the right place. Now that we've basted that in place, I'm just going to run a second line of stitching about 6 millimeters away from the zipper teeth at that point. Unpick your crotch basting stitches around this curve here at this point now. Lovely, once you've unpicked that crotch seam, let's open it up with the wrong side facing up. Just fold this side on the right of the screen away from the crotch line. Make sure that your fly extension is also just being pinned out of the way if you've taken those pins out. And what we want to do now is just run a line of basting stitches down here around the curve and underneath. If your zip is too long, at this point just shorten it using whatever method you prefer. All we're going to do now is run a line of basting stitches straight down the fly at 5 or 6 millimeters offset from the raw edge or the edge that you finished along there. We're going to run that line of stitches through the fly and also through the front. This is a basting stitch, so use a long stitch length. It's going to be just a guide that we're going to unpick in a few minutes. Okay, so just like that, and then flip it over onto the right side, and you can see that you've now got a really nice line of stitches here that you can just follow using your top stitching thread. So the only thing you might want to do is just check that you've got an equal distance from your folded edge at all points. Now, if you're not quite happy that you think that the proportion, the stitch line is kind of going in and out, it's a bit uneven, you really want the stitch line of your top stitching thread here to be parallel with the fold of the centre front here. So if you want to, you can mark on where you think that stitch line needs to be now that you've just basted that in place. Okay, so then just top stitch that in place, making sure to catch the fly as well, or as you go all the way around. Just unpick your basting stitches now. Once you've sewn and top stitched all the way around there, right to the end, we're then just going to put right sides together and sew that inner crotch seam of that curve one more time. And then we're just going to press that seam towards the left leg as we wear it, which is so towards the fly and the zip side. So press it that way. Lovely. Once you've done that, at this point then, we basically just want to continue that line of stitching all the way down and around that crotch seam like that. Excellent. Don't forget at this stage, once you've done that, you can bar tack, you can do twin liners of stitches. There's lots of different things that you can do to strengthen that. But from a construction perspective of just understanding how to draft that zipper fly, that is how you do it. It's going to open up nicely. It's going to open up right at the hips, and it's looking great. Okay, we have done our zip fly trouser front. Hope that's been helpful and you sort of now understand how to piece those pattern drafting pieces together to create the front opening of the trousers. Obviously, don't forget you can add your waistbands and any other pattern design you want and just add this detail into your final design for your bespoke trousers. So that wraps up our trouser series. We've been looking at how to create a whole range of different types of shapes using our basic block, and then we've just finished with how to create that front zip opening, which is a really useful one for trousers. I hope you've really enjoyed that. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you next time as we continue our pattern drafting series, starting to look at the jersey block next. So I hope you really enjoy that. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.